Jag blev ombedd att börja den här morgonen och göra några högst personliga reflektioner om gårdagen. Och jag tänkte försöka göra det lite grann i Björn Lings anda och verkligen tala ur mitt hjärta. Och för mig var det så att det både var en del gamla sanningar som jag känner att man kanske borde ta och ompröva. Samtidigt som det också finns en del gamla sanningar som jag tycker är väl värda att kanske lägga ännu mer tyngd på. Och jag måste nästan ta och ge lite kontext om var mina gamla sanningar kommer ifrån. För de av er som inte har träffat mig tidigare så är jag en verklig e-förvaltningsnörd ut i fingerspetsarna. Det var så att jag redan 2012 började och ansvarade för digitaliseringen på SKL. Och i samband med det så var jag inne i ESAM, E-delegationen, E-läggnämnden, Ardalan Shekarabis digitaliseringsråd, Peter Erikssons digitaliseringskommission, Mehmet Kaplans digitaliseringsråd, till och med Anna-Karin Hatts digitaliseringsråd. Så det är en lång rad av den offentliga förvaltningen som har präglat mina så att säga, gamla sanningar av svensk e-förvaltning. Och ett av mina största hallelujah moments kom faktiskt ganska tidigt igår när vi lyssnade på Vincent Aquaro. Och jag tycker att det låg nog någonting där i att han har en poäng i att vi kanske fokuserar lite för mycket på det här med vårt portalmål. Där man ser att både Sverige generellt och väl e-hälsa ska vara bäst i världen på att utnyttja digitaliseringens möjligheter. För det var ju egentligen det han sa, att men, ni ska inte ta jämföra på det sättet, ni måste fokusera på vad ni själva gör för någonting. Och man kan ju fråga sig varför det är så att vi har så uttalat komparativa mål på just det området. Blir det tillräckligt inspirerande och vägledande för att vi ska hitta rätt utifrån det vi egentligen ska ta och åstadkomma? Och då kändes det som att kunde vi egentligen inte ha ett mål istället som säger att vi ska ha en fullt ut samverkande offentlig förvaltning som inte suboptimerar utifrån den egna förvaltningens perspektiv? För det handlar ju verkligen mycket om hur vi ska kunna få den här samverkan att fungera. Och det gäller förstås lokala såväl som statliga myndigheter. Och aha, okej. Jag har fått en app också om att om någon ska till Publicom så ska ni till C8. Det kan vara så att några har kommit fel här nu och tagit sig fel. Men så får ni resa upp och gå dit där ni var igår. Ja, det var några stycken som hamnade fel. Så idag så börjar alltså vi här på e-förvaltningsdagarna här. Det är därför vi pratar om e-förvaltning och inte kommunikation. Men tillbaka till det här då med en fullt ut samverkan offentlig förvaltning. Jag tror att det ligger mycket närmare nyckeln i vad vi egentligen måste ta och åstadkomma. Och sen är jag övertygad om att det här med att bli bäst i världen på digitalisering, det kommer kunna komma då. Men det är någonting som snarare blir en bieffekt av att vi löser det här med en samverkan offentlig förvaltning. Sen var vi vidare på Jan Eliasson, som alltid är en lysande talare och tänkare. Och det som fastnade mest hos mig det var ju när han pratade om det här med ett modernt ledarskap. Han hade sina 5 punkter som han tog upp. Förändringarnas snabbhet, hänsyn till mångfald, ökad komplexitet, att allting måste vara långsiktigt hållbart och sen så att kommunikationen är central i allting som vi gör. Och jag tycker verkligen att Jan Eliasson prickade precis det som en modern ledare idag måste kunna ta hänsyn till. Och jag vet att väldigt många av oss blir nog mer och mer smärtsamt medvetna om när man stöter på ledare runt omkring sig som inte tar till sig de här frågorna. Och när jag frågade Jan Eliasson efteråt här precis vid scenen om liksom, men vad har du hämtat inspiration ifrån? Vad fick du det här ifrån? Då skrattade han bara och så sa han att men jag har suttit faktiskt här nu i helgen och skissat lite grann på det här. Men jag tyckte det blev ganska bra. Och jag måste verkligen säga att det är liksom hatten av och bock för Jan Eliasson när han tog och formulerade det så. Sen kom vi till nästa pass med våra politiker och förtroendevalda. Och där var det också ett par saker som verkligen fastnade hos mig. Det första var ju det här som vi alla svarade på. 90% av er tyckte att men digitalisering är verkligen en politisk fråga. En av mina favorittalare på området kring AI är ju Göran Lindsjö som talar väldigt inspirerande på det området. Och framförallt väljer offentligas perspektiv på artificiell intelligens. Och han brukar ju säga det efter att ha rest runt och tittat på digitaliseringen runt om i världen i den dimensionen att svenska politiker talar minst av digitalisering av alla som han stöter på. Han tar upp exempel om Tyskland, Danmark, USA, vart det nu är så ligger det på en annan nivå. Så bland de här digital frontrunners så måste vi verkligen höja den medvetenheten. Och det leder fram till punkt 2 som faktiskt också kom i slutet av det seminariet när vi kom in på kompetensfrågan. Och där kom vi fram till att om det är så att både de ledande politikerna och tjänstemännen ska kunna fatta de här kloka besluten som vi tror att de måste göra, så kommer vi helt enkelt behöva se till att man får bättre kompetens, att man lär sig de här frågorna, eftersom kunskapen om digitaliseringsfrågor är alldeles för låg. Och som Jan var inne på så tror jag också att kombinationen där kunskap kring modernt ledarskap och då digitalisering är ju också grunden till kloka beslut vad gäller i princip alla möjliga områden i samhället. Och egentligen är det också intressant i steget innan dess hur man klarar av att forma en organisationskultur som ser till att de här kloka besluten kan fattas. För man måste ju ha en organisationskultur om man ska möta komplexiteten och den snabbföränderliga omvärlden som tar och bejakar experimentlusta, som gör att vi faktiskt vågar begå misstag och se till att kunna komma rätt i slutändan. Och om vi parar det av en av de saker som vi inte har berört så mycket på konferensen, så är det också ett stort kompetenslyft som vi kommer behöva i stora delar av samhället när vi går emot den omställning som vi ser framför oss. Oavsett om det är det vi kallar för automatisering eller artificiell intelligens, så vet vi att många av de arbetsuppgifter som vi gör idag kommer försvinna och många nya kommer komma till. Och antagligen går vi mot något som kommer vara ett historiskt kompetenslyft som behövs utifrån det perspektivet. Ett annat kompetenslyft som vi inte har hunnit beröra än är också det som krävs för att kunna få in de 1,1 miljoner svenskar som lever i digitalt utanförskap idag. De som använder internet inte alls eller väldigt, väldigt lite. Hur ska vi kunna få in dem i ett digitalt innanförskap? Så egentligen så hela den biten parat med de tidigare seminarierna landar ju i att vi kommer behöva ett kompetenslyft. Dels för medborgarna i stort för att möta omställningen för AI och automatisering. Vi kommer behöva det kompetenslyftet för de som befinner sig i digitalt utanförskap. Men vi kommer också behöva ett kompetenslyft för chefer och medarbetare i offentlig sektor. För det är så att säga bara så vi kommer kunna komma fram till att vi får en förvaltning som är fullt ut samverkande och en förvaltning som på så vis klarar av att faktiskt bli bäst i världen på digitalisering. Så det var liksom någon form av slutsats som jag kom fram till efter det här. Och ja, jag tycker att det passar väldigt väl in dessutom för fortsättningen på dagen idag. För vi kommer ju ta och få lyssna på i första läget på erfarenheter ifrån Danmark kring vad det är för förutsättningar de har fått på plats för att, så att säga, lägga grunden för sin digitalisering. Och sen vidare på att lyssna på många av de som har erfarenhet av ledarskap inom offentlig sektor och digitalisering och se där hur vi egentligen nu ska kunna ta de här nästa stegen som vi så väl behöver göra. Och då har det faktiskt blivit dags att få lämna över snart här till dagens första talare. Och vi vet ju, inte minst efter att ha läst rapporter från bland annat OECD och FN och Vincenzo Aquarius som var där igår, att de länder som är duktiga på offentlig digitalisering är ju just också duktiga på det här som kallas för offentlig samverkan och förutsättningar för samverkan. Och vi vet att vissa länder har gått långt. Vi brukar prata väldigt ofta om X-Road i Estland där man verkligen har tagit och man har till och med hårdvara som man placerar ut på olika myndigheter och har tagit det här väldigt långt. Men i Danmark så ligger man ju någonstans mitt emellan Sverige och Estland kan man säga, där man har då förutsättningar med en gemensam digital arkitektur för det offentligas digitalisering. Och därför är vi särskilt glada idag att kunna få introducera en person som kan berätta om oss kring den här gemensamma offentliga digitala arkitekturen i Danmark. And I have also understood that he will speak in English to make it easier for everyone, especially those who come from the northern parts of Sweden, to understand. So please give a big round of applause for the Chief Consultant at Digitaliseringsstyrelsen in Denmark, Michael Bang-Kjeldgaard.
Ja, tack.
Tack så mycket.
Yeah, my Swedish is not so good. I'm sorry. I did try a little bit yesterday, but mostly in Danish with Swedish people, a lot of Swedish people talking a lot of Swedish. Got a little bit tired in my head, so if I started in Danish now, I think I would tire you. I hope I won't tire you now. I'll do my best to do it in English. Sometimes I might not quite know the exact English word for a specific Danish word. I looked a few up, but maybe I'll stop and I'll ask for help to translate. Some of our concepts and words are very specific, and actually that's one of the challenges we have when we're looking for standards for data. What are the terms and the concepts for data. That's one of our major challenges. And actually, that is the core of what I'm going to talk about here. How we communicate in the business, on the business level, and in the IT, on the technological level. And what I'm going to talk about is that this is, and I'm glad you actually used the word forudsætning, precondition, because I'm working in an initiative called 8.1 Good Data, which is seen as the precondition initiative for all the other 32 initiatives in the digital transformation strategy. So this is sort of a common understanding in Denmark that there are preconditions that we all have to work together on. And as we heard Jan Eliassen talk about yesterday, the most important tool are the words. So that's basically what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to give you an overflight of what we're doing, and of course that's going to be quite high level. I'm going to make a few, not real deep dives, but I'm going to dive a little bit into some of the most important things. For instance, about how we work with the challenge about the language, the words, the data. Then I'm going to talk about the background here a little bit, just to set the scene. Some of the most important elements of our focus and scope. I think that's very important when you talk about architecture. Where is the focus and the scope? Because you can't make architecture for everything with everybody. And this leads to one of the most important capabilities to build in order to do this. And once you sort of have the vision and the drive for it, and you know you want to build some capabilities, how do you actually make this operational? We have some experience in that. And then finally, most importantly actually, what about the governance in all this? Because if you don't have real governance, it doesn't really matter. So, and I have quite a lot personal experiences that, because when you talk about architecture, it's like a pendulum. So it's very important, it's not important at all. It's very important, it's not important at all. And that's a governance issue. Does the CEO and CIO level see this as important or not? And that changes over time. I worked in this field for 20 years, and I've seen the pendulum swing. In our last strategy period, the pendulum was not important. We had a mission must not fail, which is mandatory digital post and mandatory self-service in Denmark. In this strategy period, we don't have time for architecture. Come next strategy period, the one we're in now, we cannot go any further without architecture. So the pendulum swings and the governance swings. And finally, I'll sort of wrap up with some lessons learned, and which may be useful in the coming panel discussion. Okay, a little bit about the background. As I just mentioned, we have the mandatory digital post and self-service. This is very important to understand, because this sets the agenda in Denmark for the strategy we're in now, the strategy for 2016 to 2020. So when we started up planning this strategy, we had that behind us. We had made it mandatory. That means all citizens and all enterprises must use digital post and self-service. There are a few that get accepted, citizens who can't use the digital means, but it's mandatory. And that means also it sort of hits all public authorities, at least all those who are covered by, they must provide digital service in this area. It's not all areas, but in these areas. And everybody must support digital post. And in order to do this, they must also support the ID solution called NIM ID, or in the future, MIT ID. And for some services also another service called NIM Login, which is a single sign-on service. So we had actually quite a few things which were pushed out and mandated by law, and then we were there. And we accomplished the mission, but what's next? the next thing was actually it doesn't always work so well for the users. So we had sort of, well, this is great, but complaints from the businesses, the handling of rights management in our company towards digital post, for instance, is quite a problem, or from users, it's not so easy. It's still from Herodotus to Pilatus when we're doing self-service. It's not that easy, actually. So maybe we call up for the support, and then the support gets a lot of work to do. So the business case may not always be so great. So what we found out was that, okay, now we have this base level of mandatory digitization, but the next level would be to make it a bit smarter, easier to use, and more user-centric, more focus on the user needs and the user journeys. Sorry, talking takes some water. The other big and probably most important thing was the understanding that in order to make things easier, you need to be able to reuse data. That's once only in a self-service solution. That's information about the context, about the message in a digital post from the sender to the receiver. That's the enormous potential of reusing data in a number of different contexts, as big data and AI, etc. And it's using data in loosely coupled processes. Something happened here, communicate that so, oh, something happened there. That's important here. So all these kinds of using data more smartly was becoming evident as the next step, the level up. If we wanted to go sort of to a new plateau of being smart in digitization, this would be the core capability of sharing data and being able to reuse data, understand and reuse data. So we have the problem you probably also have. We are mostly in silos on our business administrative level, and we are in silos on a technical level. So how do you get out of the silos and how do you work together? That's sort of one of the main challenges. Then, of course, we have the whole issue of security and trust. That's a big challenge when you talk about cybersecurity. So we have a lot of focus on that, but it's not the most important one when you talk about architecture sorry, it's important. It's not the single one. It's also that when you work cross-domain, it's very important that you can sort of move the security and the safety with the service and with the data from domain to domain. So it's important that we have solutions that work across domains regarding security and rights management. And then finally, the governance. We didn't have the strong governance set up on architecture and standards a couple of years ago. We used to have some stronger before, but as I said, the pendulum had swung, so for a period it wasn't so strong. Then we had the strategy, and one of the initiatives in the strategy was to make this white paper called Den digitalt sammenhængende offentlige sektor. So you can see here the word sammenhængende. That was suddenly becoming important. How do you make coherent public sector? And to the right here you have sammenhængsreform. And actually the white paper was a little bit before sammenhængsreform, but now we have actually a number of different reforms about coherence in the society. Some of them about moving state entities to other parts of Denmark, and some of them, one of them, we're waiting for. It will probably come sometime this fall, which is a digital service reform, and that will focus a lot on actual initiatives on coherence, and we're working on those and preparing for that reform right now. Then we have the one called Et solidt IT-fundament. That's a strategy for IT governance in the state sector. It has a strong focus on portfolio management, the reuse of data and reuse of solutions. And this mandates actually that the things that we're doing in the strategy will also be mandatory in the state sector as a whole. Then this slide is very important because this is like a prayer. once you start doing architecture and standardization work, look out first. Don't start inventing it at home. Don't invent the deep platter. Try and see what's out there. Maybe what you need is not out there. And some years ago, we did a lot of work and we couldn't really find the international solutions and standards for it. So we had to build something ourselves. But today we're in the situation that we're going to move a lot more into using international standards. And we're working in that context in order to deliver what we need as much as possible. But of course, if you're sort of ahead of the game as we are being number one, sometimes we have ambition that a lot of other countries don't have, and maybe you can't find standard organizations that have this kind of work that we're doing. So it's not always, but some of the building blocks, for instance, from Europe are very interesting, and we're looking very much into that, not just to be cross-border interoperable, but to use them within Denmark. And a lot of the work going on in the ISA, for instance, CEMIC with the semantic standards is very important and part of what we're doing too. And of course, we look to World Wide Web and the ISO standards. The ISO standards are actually the basis for all our work in architecture. And not mentioned here, Open Group is very important too for our work in architecture. Okay, the focus and the scope. It's interoperability, and interoperability is a word which is a bit hard to translate to Danish, and we can't really use it because most people just don't understand it. It means work together. Work together. So in a sense, it's very simple, but we mostly translate it to coherence, sammenhæng. But it means that you want to work together on a level where you have processes which could or should be coupled, or you want to work together in sharing data, let others use your data, and it's working together where one application can talk to another application, so the machines supporting that are interoperable, the applications are interoperable, the data are interoperable, the processes are interoperable, and the security is interoperable, and the law, the legal frameworks in different countries, for instance, is interoperable, or in the nation supports this interoperability. It's legal to share data, it's legal to work together. And you have a strategy that supports that, and you have governance that supports that. That's sort of what we have to do. And it's in all these fields mentioned here: state, regions, municipalities, public, private sector, cross-national borders, professional fields like health, social, education, employment. And it's, of course, across organizational boundaries. We have sort of a mandate, which is cross-public sector between municipalities, regions, and state, but it actually covers all these sort of boundaries. So connecting the dots is quite a challenge. Then we have the service-oriented approach, which means that we have to see everything as services. We work together via services. We deliver to the citizens and the enterprises via services. We use in the business technology as services. So the applications support services to the business, and the applications run on technological services, which can be on a machine which is right here, or it could be out there in the cloud. This is sort of the core of the understanding. And what's important then is sort of connecting the dots, connecting the different levels of services and connecting the different domains so it all gets more coherent. It enables working together, interoperability. Now this is the initiative 8.1, as I talked about. We made the white paper as the first sort of cornerstone of our work. And in this white paper, you see not this actual drawing here, but that's the core of the content, that you have governance as a sort of a prerequisite. It says we need governance here, so we're going to build a governance framework. We need a documentation framework for the projects so they can document the architecture that they are doing, and we need to share that documentation as a common architecture to a certain level. We need to be able to check the projects doing the right thing, so we need principles and architecture rules. And in order to check that they're actually following this, we're going to make reviews. And in the center, you have, as I said, these different layers of architecture, which is the common reference architecture, or rammearkitektur, as we also call it in Denmark, frame architecture. So this white paper says that the common architecture must in a safe way support cross-organizational processes and data sharing in government and between the public and private sector. The ambition is a more efficient, coherent public sector delivering on the needs of the citizens. And the governance reach is, and this is very important, the way we started was within the strategy. I have to understand you have these three partners, the municipalities. They pay 40% of the strategy. The regions, they pay 20% of the strategy, and the state pays 40% of the strategy. So we are a group of stakeholders sitting around the same table, formulating 33 initiatives, which will be realized through a number of projects. And we agree that, okay, within this strategy, this will be run according to the principles outlined here. So this is sort of mandatory for the projects within the strategy. That was the first decision we made. So this was real, sincere governance on this. And we practiced that. So the projects in the strategy, and to be honest, it's not all, because we can't just, we have to make the framework, the rules, etc. as we start. That's 2 years ago. And we have to review. We started reviewing the first project before we had the principles, before we had the white paper. And we started trying to advise the projects to follow our documentation framework before it was finalized. Actually, that's what I'm working on right now, to finalize that. So we started doing a lot of things right, even though our foundation was not totally solid. But we have a strong governance. So we have the steering committees, the boards are supporting this, and the projects have to be advised, and it has to be debated whether they go into a review process and what to document, etc. And if they're selected, they do it. So that's where we started. And after we had shown that this practice actually works and gives value, we had it written into the strategy I mentioned before. This one, IT, et solid IT fundament. It was written in that they have to follow the architecture too. So it was sort of broadening the use of the common architecture into the whole of the state. And this is still with the focus of larger IT projects that must be reviewed in the National IT Council, which is projects above 10 million Danish kroners. They must be reviewed. So at the time right now, we are going in to see how can we work with architecture review of these kind of projects. But we're still learning, we're still trying to find out how to do that in a broader context than just the strategy. And in the municipal sector, it's very interesting because they have their own framework, their own architecture. It's very organized in Denmark in the municipal sector. They're collaborating a lot. They have the National Association of Municipalities, KL, which has their own architects, and they work a lot on architecture and has done that for many years. And they have their own special organization to define IT solutions for the public sector and to make common tendering for solutions, and they build and run some common solutions too. So they are very much into sort of their own world and challenges of how to make good solutions and how to make good architecture. And they took a decision actually last year before the state and said, okay, but we're going to follow the common architecture made in the strategy And they actually said that before the state, and they said the state should follow us and the regions should follow us. So for now, the state has followed, and the regions are a bit special because they're part of the health sector as the main task they have, and the health sector has their own law about standards, etc. So that's a little bit a special situation. But what you can see is that the work we did with the white paper and the architecture within the strategy has actually expanded a lot already. We're not like it's heaven or fantastic, but everybody agrees that's the way to go. Still have a lot to do and a lot to learn, but that's the way to go. It's not like there's a totally different way to go. I was 2 days ago. On Monday. I was in the tax administration. They have been reorganized completely, and now they have one special styrelse, one special agency working with architecture and IT. And I was there talking to all their architects, and they when they look at the guidelines that I'm developing for the common architecture, yeah, but we also need that and that, but it's good what you're doing and we'll follow it. That was sort of the main communication from them to me, and I was happy because we always see they want to go their own way, but now they say, okay, we're going to go that way. So that's very important. This is sort of a simple image to tell about the vision, and it's user-centric. You see the user as the core actor in this vision. So it's not so much about efficiency. Of course, my agency is part of the Ministry of Finance, so we are very interested in efficiency and saving money, of course, but it's not really the core of making good architecture just to save money. The core of good architecture must be to make value for users, because the reason why we use IT is to support making what we have to do. And what we're trying is to make citizens and employers in companies do a lot of the public sector work that we used to do. And we want to make a better society, so we want to make everything we can to support citizens and enterprises to have a good life and to develop and grow, etc. So this user-centric way of looking at things is very important. Behind the screen, you see these puzzle parts, which are symbols of our reference architectures or building blocks or different domains of what we're trying to accomplish in order to deliver coherent services and coherent user journeys. And you could see we use often these puzzles as a symbol for reference architectures. The reference architectures are papers that tell sort of everybody, okay, in this domain like user rights management or digital self-service or cross-cutting processes or data sharing, this is how we should do it. This is the vision, this is the common principles, these are the main concepts and building blocks we're using in this domain, and it gives sort of ideas, not exact solutions, but idea of solutions to be realized, ways to migrate towards realizing the vision. That's the core of the reference architectures. So the reference architectures can be used by projects who are developing solution architectures. Reference architectures are sort of abstract and fairly high level, so you can't just translate it very simply. So often we have to make a lot of more work coming out of the reference architectures. We define building blocks, so some building blocks we have to specify in more detail, and some building blocks become actual standards, common standards. So as standards, you could see them as solution building blocks, and then you can take it and say, okay, this is the standard I'm going to use, and my solution is going to support this standard. And sometimes we take building blocks and say, okay, we're going to actually make a common solution, like digital post is a common solution, and NIM-ID is a common solution. So there are some of the building blocks in this domain that should be common, If so, then we have to make a decision about that, make a project to realize that solution in common and decide how to do it. So it's very important with these reference architectures is sort of the common base. And in the strategy, it was actually written in from the start to make a common reference architecture on user management, self-service, sharing of data, and the one which is not really finished, so therefore I put it in brackets, overview of cases and benefits. So these were the first reference architectures we made in this strategy. And we're just starting up a new one now on cross-cutting processes and one on information security. And then we talk a lot about, we probably also need one on robust and secure infrastructure. And then in the future, there could be many other reference architectures because there could be many other areas which are interesting for us to have a common architecture on. But these are the subjects that we have been working on and are working on currently. This is actually a very important slide because this is like the core of our work. You have the vision. How do you go from vision to reality? And we made this. This is a postcard. I actually have a bunch of them. Not so many, enough for everybody, but I have a little bit here. I'll leave it on the stage. But this is a very important thing. As an artifact, it's interesting because you could have it in your back pocket, so you could say to people, you should always have these and know these principles, and on the backside, the rules. The ones with the little letters, nobody can read this, of course, and I won't go through it, but I'll just talk briefly about it. But this is very important because it's the principles and the architecture rules that tells projects what to do. For instance, on governance, architecture is governed on the right level according to common framework. Strategy, architecture promotes coherence, innovation, and efficiency. Legal level, architecture and regulation support each other. Security, privacy, and trust is ensured. Task, which is like business, processes optimized cross-cuttingly. Information, good data are shared and reused. Application, IT solutions cooperate efficiently, and infrastructure, data, and services are delivered in a robust way. On the other side, you have, I'm not going to go through those, 22 more precise rules which are telling projects this is what you must do. This is the core content of the white paper, and you can download the white paper in Danish or English on our website, and you can see more information related to the rules, what precisely to do. But it doesn't stop there because the rules are supported by specific products. Oh yeah. So we have a number of products supporting the rules. Now, I should say one more thing about this. No, I can't go back here. It died. Okay. This died. Is there a technician who can help me here? I only have this tool. Okay. We'll take it from here. Behind the rules, there will be products. And when we started with the white paper, that was in May last year, we didn't have all the products on the shelves. When the white paper came out, we actually only had one, which is this one, which is also in English and in Danish, which are the common rules on how to model concepts and data. It's quite a big book, actually. It's at least twice the size of the white paper. It's much more detailed. So it's like you have the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is the white paper, this postcard. But below that, you have more. But this is a specialist product. This is a product for people who are information architects and who work with concepts and logical data models, who work with sharing data or reusing data. But this is, of course, important because if you want to make this operational and support real interoperability, you have to make people work in different areas, not everywhere, but in some areas you have to make them work in a similar way. This slide is quite interesting because if the authorities use the common rules, they will actually be able to support the vision that from legal work made by lawyers across the work done by the architects, you will be able to meet in the solutions an architecture of data which is coherent from law to technical solution. So that actually connects the dots from the law to the application and the technical solution. And in this way, it supports the way we talk, communicate, and work with data in the business. So that's a very important core. This is just a snapshot of some of the things we have on our shelves. We talk about this as shelves because it's different aspects or perspectives on architecture, and as you can see, it's the rainbow colors because to signal that it's a holistic perspective. But we also talk about it as shelves, like it's a bookshelf where you can put information. So we have a bookshelf on documentation. I'll show you that in a minute. But this is a shelf of the products we made to support the white paper. So we have a common fora for governance, especially we have the steering committee on data and architecture, which is the committee approving all products becoming part of the common architecture. The common architecture is called FDA, in short. And they're also responsible for the guidelines for documentation and for review, and they're responsible for making the reviews. They have a board doing the reviews, but they're sort of those who are dealing with the issues that come up in relation to a review. They also have the responsibility for the reference architectures and what we call the rammearkitektur, and the whole concept around that, and guidance on. We have guidance on. Digitaliseringsklar lovgivning, digitization-ready laws. We have reference architectures on user management, as I said, and we're going to work on information architecture, and we have a number of guiding things on security, including a whole paper on requirements, e.g. to support GDPR. We have two reference architectures supporting the task level with self-service and case and benefits overview, and we're working, as I said, on cross-cutting processes. We have on information, we have the rules on how to model, and we're working on common standards for a number of areas. The basic data are covered, but we're also at the moment, for instance, just working on how to describe an IT system, a common standard for that. Standards for how to describe the quality of data, etc. We have guidance on how to make REST-based web services, so there's a common approach to that. And we have a reference architecture and on sharing data and documents, where we're sort of pointing out some different integration patterns for application integration. We have at the moment a lot of work going on on the infrastructural level on using e-delivery more or less everywhere in the Danish society. And we have, of course, a number of solutions, as mentioned here, with NemID and NemLogin, eID Gateway, Digital Post, NemKonto, Borger.dk, the portal, Virk.dk, another portal, and common protocols for instance, OIO IDVS is secure web services. So there's quite a lot of things which are commonly agreed as that is what we use. Now, very briefly here, the common documentation framework which we're working on now. As you can see, you have on the top here, you have the three architecture rules, the 1.4. The first here is 1.4. do make sure that the project architecture is reviewed, is supported by guidelines for architecture review. The second one, architecture rule, use common frame for description of architecture. So we're making guidelines for architecture documentation, and that is work being done actually. It should have dotted lines or be a little bit gray now because it's almost final, but it will only be approved in December. The third one is Architecture Rule 2.1, use and help expand the common architecture. And we have an introduction document to how to do that and use the catalog of building blocks and use of reference architectures. And then we have below that, the red one is common public rules for concept and data modeling, as I mentioned. So that's a very important methodology document. And we're doing work on a guideline on using Archimate and a guideline on using architecture methods based on TOGAF ADM, which is, probably not everybody understand that. TOGAF ADM means the Open Group Architecture Framework Architecture Development Method. So we're going to make a quite short introduction to how to do your architecture work using a common international standard framework, but we're going to relate it to all the products and guidelines that we have in order to help projects do things right when they do architecture. And what you see here below is the bookshelf of recommended architecture products, and that's still a draft. But you could put a lot of products in an architecture bookshelf, and some of the products are made hardcore by architects, but some of the products are actually made by not hardcore architects, like lawyers. Because you have also the legal bindings and the business rules, etc., put up in this shelf because they're important for the solutions, the important part of the architecture. So this bookshelf will enable projects to look at the different deliverables, possible deliverers, and say, okay, what is relevant in this project? And it will enable the reviewers to say, okay, do you have those products? Have you thought about these things? And it will help projects to see, okay, this is what we are doing right now, right? This is what we're talking about. It will help projects to say, did somebody else make something that we can reuse? It will help projects coordinate, not just for reuse, but say, we have this product, you have that product, maybe they should fit together. How can we do that? So the whole framework of what to do of architecture and what is to do of architecture documentation and architecture communication is very important. We're also making guidelines within this whole framework of what kind of language. So for data modeling, it's UML, Universal Modeling Language, which is good for that and a number of other things. But it's not so good for the holistic view on architecture. So that's why we are also making recommendations on using Archimate, which is quite new, and only a very few people actually know how to use Archimate. It's not really rocket science. It's just we're not there, so we're really trying to move people in that direction, and many of our key stakeholders are sending their architects out to learn how to use Archimate because we found out and agree that this is a very good language to get a common overview of the most important parts of the architecture. And this is also the way that we see EU are going. The European interoperability framework is the core, and on top of that they build a European interoperability reference architecture. This is also made by using Archimate. So it's sort of a new mainstream that we're working in here. Yep. How to handle governance? We had set up the board. We set up the review process, which looks at the documentation. So this is actually the core of how to make governance. So we can tell the board responsible for the projects that they have to ask the project to make the necessary and relevant documentation, and they must be part of a review process. And the review gives a feedback to the project, and the project must tell what it will do in relation to the recommendations given by the review board. And these recommendations are handled in the steering committee on data and architecture and in the steering committee responsible for the specific project. So this is the process, which is just tells that we have a number of different kinds of reviews, and we have the bookshelf up here tells this is like an image of how one project could have these different documents, and we're actually using this in a specific number of projects now, where we're going to make a common review of the coherence in these projects. So the lessons learned: drivers must be identified, and to us that was the strategy and the initiatives in the strategy. Governance is imperative. It must be sincere, and it must be sort of including the main stakeholders. They must be on board. Interoperability is a good scope, but I constantly meet with stakeholders that, well, for us it's more than that. Enterprise level or solution level is deeper, enterprise level is broader. So it's quite a challenge on where to stop and where you should go to support people in a different task relating to architecture. And you need the supporting products. And competences are very important, so in certain areas they're low and you have to do something about that. That's it. Thank you for me. This is the website where you can read more about it. Basically everything we produce of supporting materials, guidelines, etc. will be up here. Different concrete models will be publicized in our catalogs on this website too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. I must say this is, when you listen to architects describing what they do, it's not always in a way so that you really can understand if you're not an architect yourself, but I think you did a very, very good job. And I'm also sorry for actually speeding this up, but we have a lot of time to...
that was perfect timing,
yeah,
1 minute late.
Time for the panel. I just have one question that I wanted to ask, and we know that money doesn't solve everything, but it would be interesting to understand how much resources in terms of people and money that you spend within digitalization studios and on the common architecture.
I can't really tell you a specific number of that, because we have a budget in our initiative. That's not huge. Then you have budgets in the other initiatives who are doing different kinds of work. Sometimes it's an analysis, sometimes it's a solution. A lot of the work going on in a number of initiatives is actually analysis, preparing for a solution. Then you get to, okay, now we know what to build, and this means we're going to build these building blocks, we're going to make these standards, and then we're going to build this common part of the solution, and then we're going to roll out.
Yeah.
And then you have a political debate, and you make a political agreement, including the money. So new money can come in. Every year we make new agreements to make this realized.
But we're talking at least 100 million Danish kroner plus, or...
Again,
you don't know. Okay,
because it depends. We are very business case focused. A lot of the products I told you about are not very expensive. I always say to make the first version of a reference architecture, you need 500,000 Danish kroners. To make the final version, you need another half. So it's 1 million per reference architecture. It's a process to do that. In the middle of the process, you have to sort of maybe make a bit more analysis, pilot projects. They cost too, but the reference architecture as a product is about 1 million.
Thank you. One more big hands of applause for Michael. And
just one thing.